So, I think throughout this pandemic, one thing I really learned about myself is that it's really important to give yourself time to just relax and reset.
Also figured out what I value about myself, like what I could do to make myself happy and keep myself happy even when isolated from the other people.
I think that pre-pandemic, everyone was, living our normal lives, and then this thing happened, and it was like a shock to the system, and everyone was like, let's be crazy hyper productive. But then we kind of came to this realization that, wait, no, let's just take this time to relax.
I really started to figure out what I value and how much of that revolves around other people, like how much I value the people closest to me, especially when I couldn't see them.
And that I'm a very social person. I wouldn't want to be, just being stuck in my room was pretty hard.
I think one of the biggest things that I learned about society as a whole is just how much human connection is important to other people.
It's definitely the idea of empathy.
Really, no matter how incompetent the systems we live in can seem, people are capable of adapting.
Being able to step into someone else's shoes and experience what they're feeling is so important.
We tried to do it virtually and we didn't have that same feeling of togetherness, and I think the pandemic just really showed how much people value that feeling.
And you can, live an enjoyable life no matter, what your circumstance.
For me personally, I'm a generally very positive person. I like to be upbeat and keep a good attitude about things. But by the winter time, when it was getting colder and it was harder to be outside with other people, I really did start feeling the decrease in my positivity about the whole situation. I was definitely suffering a little bit. And then about March, I kind of hit a wall. I was low motivation, didn't really want to get out and do things.
Just kind of spiraling in a downward motion almost.
Being isolated definitely took a toll, particularly whenever there was no end in sight, sort of around the winter, fall period.
So I would just sit at home and I would have nothing to do, and I couldn't see any of my friends, and I just felt really alone. But then summer rolled around, and I definitely think it's been upward since then.
When the weather started getting warmer and the vaccine started coming out, so there was hope, and I could almost see a possible ending or something better.
This whole summer has sort of been a big recovery period from that.
Just interacting with my friends just put me in such a good mood for the entire week.
I think being alone for weeks at a time kind of forced me to address things that I'd never really properly confronted before.
I definitely think that it's taught me a lot about how to cope with my emotions, which is something that I didn't really do before. I would just avoid them at all costs.
It's sort of taught me not to, look away from my problems.
Overall, I do think that COVID helped the conversation surrounding mental health, because in the past people would suffer alone, but with COVID everybody was alone, everybody was feeling that isolation.
And it has sort of opened up the conversation.
And so then I think that schools and workplaces and the places where people were coming together virtually started noticing and focusing more on bringing the conversation to mental health and how can you help yourself.
Pre-pandemic, I don't really remember anyone talking about mental health. Definitely during the pandemic, I feel like people were really talking about depression and anxiety and things that would come up if you're alone and just basically stuck with your own thoughts.
People were doing a lot more reflecting and they could kind of find the help that they needed.
I've had conversations with my own parents and with my friends about my mental health, which is something I never would have done before. The biggest positive takeaway for me is that you're always going to have people around you who love you and care for you and are here to support you in every single way possible.
It was probably the community that I felt even when I was separated from everybody else. My friends that were going through similar things, that we could then talk about it and work through it together and help each other. was very lucky to have a good support system to help me through any tougher times that I was going through. So I think for me personally, that was my biggest takeaway, was just appreciation.
You have to have a positive mindset, I guess.